Hi, I'm the woman who helped build a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, only to be called too expensive and fired by my own sister. She didn't even look me in the eye, just handed it off to her lawyer like I was a liability. But what she didn't know was that I'd written something into the company papers, something even she forgot. And when the lawsuits hit, her hand started shaking. So tell me, have you ever been erased by someone who once begged for your help? Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment. I'd love to know. I walked into the office that morning like I had for the past 7 years. Same corner coffee from the place across the street. Same key fob tap at the door. Same elevator ding up to the 4th floor of Cantor Biotech. The only thing different was the air. It was heavy. Still, like something was about to break. On the shared desk that Celine and I used to split before she got her own office, my old fountain pen lay abandoned, the one I'd given her when we landed our first big contract. It still had her name engraved beside mine, Cantor and Cantor. I stared at it a little too long. "Malis, quick huddle, upstairs," said Trish from HR. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. My gut twisted. I followed her, trying not to let my shoes click too loud on the floor. The executive boardroom was already full. Celine at the head, a couple of directors, and 4 staffers I helped hire. A few offered me confused half smiles. One avoided my eyes completely. Celine didn't waste time. "We're restructuring," she said, clasping her hands on the polished mahogany table like she was reading a bedtime story. "And after reviewing our financials, it's clear that we can't afford to keep everyone. Effective today, Maelis will be stepping down from her role." The silence hit harder than her words. "Wait," I said, blinking. "What?" Celine turned to the others. "Her contributions have been invaluable, especially in the early days, but moving forward, we need a leaner team." I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until a junior researcher spoke up. "Didn't Malis negotiate the FDA deal last quarter?" Celine gave a soft chuckle, like she was amused. "That was then. This is now." A folder slid across the table. Pre-printed. Ready. "This is your formal exit package," said Trish. "We'll ensure your transition is as smooth as possible." Transition? Smooth? I stared at the folder, heart hammering. This wasn't a shock. It was an ambush. They had planned this. They had sat in a room without me, penciled my name into an exit line, and printed papers to make it clean. Neat, painless, only it wasn't. 7 years. Countless sleepless nights. The year I funneled my entire savings into the company just to keep us afloat when the payroll bounced. The flu season I powered through a 22-page proposal with a 102-degree fever. The time Celine called me crying in the parking lot after a client rejection, and I told her I'd never let the company sink. I wasn't just part of Cantor Biotech. I was the damn engine. Now I was too expensive. I looked at Celine. She didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not even a thank you. "You're handling this with grace," someone muttered beside me. But it wasn't grace. It was numbness. I picked up the pen, ironically the same one lying forgotten on our old desk, and signed. No tears, no raised voice, just my name. Neat, clean, painless. I stood. My legs didn't buckle. My hands, though, trembled with the rage I wouldn't show. Celine nodded once. "Exit through the east corridor, please." That's when I knew. She'd orchestrated even my exit path. I walked past the faces, some ashamed, some complicit, all silent. "They want silence?" I whispered to myself as the glass doors shut behind me. "I'll give them silence." But inside me, something cracked, something deep. By the time I stepped onto the sidewalk, the drizzle had turned into a full, steady rain, one of those gray Seattle days where even the sky feels like it's watching. I didn't open my umbrella. I just walked, clutching my tote bag like it was some kind of anchor in a world that had suddenly gone silent. No one called out after me. No one tried to explain. Outside, I reached a bench under the half-shelter of a tree and sat, water soaking through my coat. I pulled out my phone and called Adrian, straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen. "Hey, call me back. Please." My voice didn't even sound like mine. Then I called Mom. She didn't pick up either. Same outcome? Voicemail. I hung up before the beep ended. That was the moment it hit me. No one knew. No one even knew I had just been erased from the company I built with my bare hands. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my shoes were squishing with every step and my fingertips were numb. The place was dark. Still. I hadn't turned on the heat before leaving that morning, thinking I'd be home late. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt abandoned. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, but the sound echoed too loud. I paused. The fridge hummed, but it was nearly empty. Just a bottle of almond milk, some takeout soy sauce packets, and a wilted bag of spinach. On the counter, dishes I'd washed the night before sat in the rack like little ghosts of routine. It was like the whole apartment had been waiting for me to wake up. Only now, I couldn't tell if I was waking up or falling apart. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But I just stood there looking around, taking inventory. Not of things, but of years. I walked over to the file cabinet near the desk. Most people probably don't keep a hard copy of their life. I did. Contracts, emails, founding papers, my just-in-case folder. I pulled out the original napkin. We'd laughed when we signed it. 50/50ths, no matter what. It still had a faint coffee ring on the corner. That was the day we came up with the name, Cantor and Wells. She had liked the sound of it, but Wells had been my idea, my grandmother's maiden name. She never even asked. And then I remembered Celine's voice that day. You bring the brains, I'll bring the shine. I used to think it was her way of lifting me up. Now it just sounded like branding. Somewhere along the way, we became just her. I flipped open the thick contract folder. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts, almost like they didn't want me to process what I was doing. Page after page, there it was, legalese, dense paragraphs I'd trusted at the time. And then I found it. A clause buried deep in section 14.3. Ownership to be reassessed at the 7-year mark based on current contributions and capital investments. My name wasn't anywhere near the amendment signed a year ago. Just hers. Just Celine. I sat back on the edge of my couch, pages sprawled around me like leaves after a storm. I had nothing. Not a share, not a vote, not even my name on the board. And still, I was blamed. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from her. Sorry it had to be this way. You just weren't scaling with the vision anymore. Scaling? I nearly laughed, bitterly. I scaled this, I muttered out loud. I scaled this from a garage to a boardroom. I stood there, not moving. The weight of betrayal doesn't land all at once. It wraps around you slowly, like a wet coat you forgot you were wearing. But the truth I uncovered next made me realize this wasn't just business. It was personal. The rain had finally stopped sometime after dawn, but my thoughts hadn't. I stood by the kitchen window, watching puddles ripple with the occasional drop from the roof, the silence pressing in around me like a vacuum. I hadn't slept, barely even moved. After everything I'd poured into that company, the hours, the funding, the vision, it all vanished like smoke behind that office door. Celine's words kept replaying. You weren't scaling with the vision. Like I was dead weight, like I'd held her back. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Not just the cruelty, but the confidence, like she'd already won. I wandered back toward the old filing cabinet I hadn't touched in years. The bottom drawer stuck from humidity, squealing like it knew it hadn't been visited in a long time. I pulled out a worn folder labeled Concepts 2016. My handwriting, sharp and angled, stared back at me from a stack of notes. Pages upon pages of early sketches, models, compound ratios, material lists. I traced a diagram I had drawn on a napkin in that cafe years ago. I remembered the coffee shop's flickering light, the crumpled receipt we signed half-jokingly, 50/50ths, no matter what. I paused. That was the day we decided on the name, Cantor and Wells. The name had come to me during a walk through Green Lake Park, and I offered it to her that afternoon. You bring the shine, I'll bring the science, she'd said. I believed her. Back then, I hadn't cared who got credit, as long as the work helped someone. But this wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about theft. I grabbed my old laptop and dug through archived emails. One subject line jumped out like a warning siren. Provisional patent submission, formalize ASAP. I clicked. The body of the email was short. Hi Melis, reminder, the provisional is in your name. Please finalize filing before April 18th, or it could be challenged or overwritten. Let me know if you need help. Gina, paralegal. Gina, right. She had gone on maternity leave. I scrolled further. 2 months later, a notification I'd never seen before. USPTO confirmation, filing updated for Cantor and Wells Medical Compound. And underneath, the name, Celine Cantor. Same diagrams, same formulations, same footer quote I used in the early decks. What saves a life should be born in truth. Except now, the life-saving thing had a different author. I felt the room tilt, not from surprise but from confirmation. She didn't forget to list me, she erased me, and it didn't stop there. Out of some twisted masochism, I opened YouTube, typed Celine Cantor TEDx. The thumbnail popped up instantly, her in a red blazer smirking under a spotlight. I hit play. The first 2 minutes were mine, word for word. She even lifted the line about tissue oxygenation from the night I stayed up tweaking the formula while she was off sipping champagne at some investor gala. The camera panned to an applauding audience. I sat back, breath caught in my chest. So that's what it was. Not oversight, not ambition, theft. I stood up, walked slowly to the hallway where the landline still hung like a relic. I dialed the main office number, 1 ring, 2, 3. A young woman picked up. Cantor and Wells, how may I help you? My voice was calm. Tell Celine Cantor. I found the patent. Silence, not even a breath. Then, click, deadline. I set the receiver back, gently. My heart didn't race. Not anymore. This wasn't panic. This was calculation. The moment I opened the package, I knew it wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. The envelope felt heavier than its contents. Inside, a cleanly printed copy of Celine's TEDx script, sections underlined in red ink, and a business card from Cantor Legal Group. The message it carried was cold and polished. We represent Celine Cantor and the Vitagenics Group. Cease and desist from any misrepresentation or attempt to reclaim intellectual property. The phrasing made my skin prickle. Misrepresentation. Reclaim. They'd twisted the truth so tight it now wore a suit. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands flat, trying to steady myself. The kettle behind me clicked as it cooled. I'd made tea an hour ago and forgotten it existed. Cease and desist. From reclaiming what was mine? That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. Instead, I rummaged through the small filing box I kept in my bedroom closet. Contracts, scribbled notes, napkin promises, old laptop drives. Somewhere in the mess of midnight papers, I found what I needed. A copy of an NDA I remembered signing 5 years ago, back when we first began attracting serious investors. I had signed it at 11:37 p.m. I remember the timestamp because it was printed in the corner of the scanned file. That night, I'd been coming off a 15-hour stretch working on an early prototype pitch deck. I was exhausted, my eyes barely open when Celine slid the document in front of me. You trust me, right? She had said. And I had. But as I read through it now, with rested eyes and a lawyer's caution, something leapt off the page like it was embossed in blood. All intellectual property developed under this venture shall be solely owned by the Vitagenics Group and its principal signatory. Not co-owned, not shared, solely owned. And the principal signatory? Celine. My name wasn't anywhere near that clause. Not in the main section, not in the addendum. Just a dated signature on a version of the truth I'd never fully read. I called Cal, an old law school friend who now ran a boutique legal practice in Spokane. He agreed to hop on a video call despite the hour. I angled my phone toward the NDA. He didn't say anything for 30 seconds. Then he leaned back and exhaled. This clause could hold, unless you can prove fraud or coercion. I felt a pit open in my stomach. Cal, I was dead tired. She knew that. I was in the middle of finishing the grant proposal while she was sipping champagne at some fundraiser. He narrowed his eyes and asked me to scroll down to the footer metadata. Then his brow furrowed. This version was edited after it was signed. Look. He paused. You didn't sign this version. I blinked. Then what did I sign? His voice dropped. That, Melis, is your leverage. The rage didn't come like a wave. It simmered. Slow, steady, hot. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the record set right. I wanted the truth restored. I opened my laptop and drafted a short email. Attached are screenshots of your NDA clause. You may want to review the edit history before sending threats. Regards, Melis. No legal posturing, no begging, just facts and fire. Then I waited. An hour passed, then 3. A full day, silence. Until my phone buzzed at 9:43 p.m. the following evening. A Google notification. Celine Cantor has requested access to your Google Docs archive. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't explaining it. She was scared. The next morning, my inbox exploded with screenshots. I hadn't even opened my eyes fully when the first ping came through, then the next, and then 10 more. I reached for my phone, blinking against the bright screen. There were messages from old classmates, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, and even a reporter from some tabloid I didn't recognize. My name was trending, and not for anything I'd ever want associated with me. There it was, on a niche biotech gossip forum, now shared across LinkedIn, Facebook groups, and even Twitter threads. A post with my face, cropped unflatteringly from a years-old team photo. The caption read, "Disgruntled ex-founder goes rogue, claims she invented what she was fired from." The post went on, quoting me, out of context, from internal team emails, some joking comments twisted into accusations. The words unstable, obsessive, and vindictive were sprinkled throughout like confetti. Someone even dredged up a blurry photo of me in sweats, walking out of a CVS late one night, claiming I'd been spiraling for months. Hashtags like startup scandal and tech meltdown were catching on faster than wildfire, and yet I hadn't said a single word publicly. Not an interview, not a tweet, nothing. But someone clearly wanted me gone, erased, discredited. I set the phone down and just sat there, frozen, until the notifications stopped feeling like vibrations and started sounding more like warning bells. By mid-morning, I forced myself out. I thought maybe coffee would help, or at least pretending I still existed in the world. At my usual shop, I gave a small nod to the barista. She didn't nod back. In fact, she turned and busied herself behind the espresso machine like she hadn't seen me at all. I stood in line for 5 minutes before realizing no one was acknowledging me. No one. Even the guy who always complimented my laptop stickers didn't lift his eyes. I left without ordering. I walked aimlessly, the cold biting through my coat even though I barely felt it. I called Riley, one of my old project leads, straight to voicemail. Then Jared. He used to joke he'd name his firstborn after me. Nothing. Not even a, "Who's this?" I stood on a quiet side street, phone still in my hand, heart pounding, and whispered to no one in particular. They want silence, shame, erasure. And then the next thought rose, like heat from inside me. They picked the wrong woman to erase. Still, later that night, I hovered over the delete account button on my LinkedIn. For a moment, I seriously considered it. Vanishing might be easier than pushing through this. But just before I clicked, a notification popped up. A private message. From Arden Blake. I blinked. Arden had been one of our interns. Bright, nervous, a little too quick to apologize, but I always liked her. I opened the message. "Hi, Melis. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. They tried the same thing with me. Pretended I never touched the clinical dashboards, said I only fetched coffee, but I still have the logs. I saw what they did to you. I know what you built." I stared at the screen, suddenly blinking through tears I hadn't realized were there. Then another message followed. "If you need anything, I still have those folders you shared with me during the build phase. I never deleted them." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there in silence, letting the weight of her words settle over me. Someone remembered. Someone kept the truth. And that night, I didn't post a rant. I didn't yell into the void. Instead, I opened my resume and attached a section labeled Patent Contributions and IP Discrepancies Filed. I went back through my digital archive and uploaded the original formula diagrams, time-stamped emails, and version logs from 7 years ago. Then I filed a quiet motion with the U.S. Patent Office, correction of inventorship. No hashtags, no press releases, just documentation, precision, and calm fury. Before closing my laptop, I opened a new email. No subject, no salutation, just one line. Your fear is showing. I hit send. That night, while I was brushing my teeth, the screen of my phone lit up. Celine was calling. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at the ceiling. Her voice didn't sound like Celine, the one who could charm a boardroom or bulldoze a negotiation table. This voice sounded small, shaky, and I realized something. That wasn't a question. That was a warning. I let her voice hang there, awkward, desperate. Then I said flatly, I'm listening. For a beat, there was just breathing. Celine hesitated, then put on that familiar silk over steel tone. Look, we're both hurting. The media's running wild. This isn't what I wanted. Maybe we can clean this up together, quietly? I stared at the ceiling like I could see through it. She sounded rehearsed, managed, and terrified. I kept my voice even. You didn't hesitate to fire me like a stranger, so don't come asking for access to my silence. You lost that luxury. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then she hung up. Just like that. No goodbyes, no negotiation. But I imagined her pacing, her nails tapping some glass-topped table. She'd expected me to grovel or stay quiet. She wasn't ready for the version of me that was done protecting her. The next morning, I met with Benjamin Tran, my attorney and an old college friend who'd stayed in the startup legal circuit. We sat across from each other in a quiet office above a bakery, the scent of fresh croissants oddly grounding. I want to file, I told him. Wrongful termination, defamation, and IP theft. He looked up from his notes, brows rising slightly. You sure you're ready for that heat? She dragged me through the fire first, I said. I'm just sending her the smoke. Benjamin leaned back, nodded once, then opened his laptop. With Arden's help, I'd gathered enough dirt to sink a mid-size PR firm, recordings of investor calls where Celine pitched my designs, transcripts where she word for word repeated my internal memos. Arden had even flagged calendar entries noting when I delivered the build-out slides Celine had later claimed as her own. By the end of the day, Benjamin had drafted the initial filing. Celine's firm received the documents at 4:15 p.m. By 6 p.m. Her team had already pulled 3 smear posts from their official social pages. The gossip board thread that had gone viral the week before. Suddenly deleted. Even a LinkedIn blog post from her head of marketing disappeared. I didn't need to be inside the walls to know what was happening. You could hear them scrambling from the outside. But I wasn't in this for applause or headlines. That night, over tea, I opened my email and reached out to 3 old clients, quiet professionals who had once praised my product roadmap and user testing intuition. I wasn't sure they'd respond. 2 replied the next morning. By Thursday, one had invited me to coffee and offered a modest grant through a new biotech incubator they were supporting. We always knew you were the core brain behind the Vitagenics build, she told me across the table. You don't need them, you never did. Your ideas scared them. That's why they cut you out. She paused, gave me a careful smile. So, build again. But this time, for yourself. I walked away from that meeting with a keycard, a small startup lab space, and the legal foundation to register my own LLC. It was still small, still fragile, but it was mine. That same afternoon, I got the email I'd been waiting for. Subject: Correction of Inventorship Approval Notice. The U.S. Patent Office had acknowledged my claim. Legally, I was now listed as co-inventor on the proprietary tech that Celine had tried to gatekeep, and that meant one thing. They couldn't license, sell, or pitch it further without my signature. No more hiding me under NDAs, no more wiping my name off decks. I was the lock. And Celine? She had no key. That evening, I sat at my kitchen counter, watching her on a live stream from a biotech conference in Chicago. She stood stiff at the podium, lips tight, reading from cue cards instead of improvising like she used to. Her usual sparkle was gone. Her jokes landed flat. The moderator looked uncomfortable. She kept glancing at her phone like someone was texting bad news. I didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I just watched, because I knew what was happening inside her now. She thought I'd go quietly. She just learned I don't vanish. I evolve. I should have known it wouldn't come without a hit back. The morning of the biotech panel, I stood in the prep room sipping coffee from a chipped paper cup, rehearsing my opening lines under my breath. I'd double-checked my slide deck the night before, triple-checked it before leaving the house. Everything was ready, or so I thought. When I handed over my USB to the AV tech, he frowned. "These files aren't opening right. You sure this is the right version?" I blinked, confused. "Of course, let me check." He handed the drive back. I plugged it into my own laptop, and my stomach clenched. The deck had been scrambled, slides missing, the formatting corrupted. Worse, there was an inserted page I didn't recognize. It contained a blurry graph citing data from a public university, exactly the kind of unapproved reuse that screamed plagiarism. Panic surged. I tried to explain, but the organizers were stiff-faced and quick. "We can't allow misrepresentation, Dr. Marin. We'll have to pull your segment." Just like that. No questions, no appeal. I stood at the side of the stage as the next speaker went up, eyes blurry, heart thudding. I wasn't just disqualified, I was humiliated, publicly. Someone wanted to break more than my voice. They wanted my name scorched from the industry. I rode the elevator down in silence, surrounded by people who avoided eye contact. Outside, my phone was already buzzing. The biotech gossip board was on fire. An anonymous post claimed I'd been removed for academic fraud, that I'd lifted another researcher's data and passed it off as proprietary innovation. They'd even uploaded screenshots, doctored, but convincing if you didn't know what to look for. One reply read, "Classic case of a bitter founder getting caught." Another, "She always seemed unstable. This tracks." I leaned against the building wall, fighting to keep my face neutral. A couple of passers-by paused, recognizing me from the now viral clips, and whispered. That evening, back at home, I pulled the security logs from the panel prep room. It took hours and a favor from an old contact, but there it was. A blurry clip showing Celine's assistant in the prep room 5 minutes after I dropped off my USB. But the file tampering? Traced to an anonymous IP, masked, routed overseas. This wasn't just Celine. Someone else had skin in the game. The next 48 hours were a blur. I tried to breathe, tried to think, but Celine wasn't done. She went public. A carefully lit video on her professional page, soft piano in the background. "This was never about excluding anyone," she began. "It was about integrity. I had to make a heartbreaking decision to part ways with someone I loved, who changed." Every word like honey and poison. "She's struggling, and I only hope she gets the help she needs." I froze, fists clenched. She was painting me as unhinged, emotional, dangerous. By the next morning, my inbox was a mess. Podcasts dissected the scandal. Commenters called me obsessed, jealous, desperate for relevance. One message said, "You should have stayed in your lane." And then, one of my old clients pulled out of a joint proposal. No reason, just silence. I sat in my apartment, blinds closed, lights dimmed, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Powerless. They weren't just trying to discredit me. They were rewriting my story while I was still alive to watch. That night, I hovered over the delete account button on LinkedIn, finger trembling. Then, an alert. Private message, no name, no subject. I opened it. A video file. Celine, Arden, laughing together in a hotel suite. Celine's voice. She was always too soft, smart, sure, but disposable. Arden smirking. "Let her cry to a judge, it's done." Then the clip ended. Beneath it, one line from the anonymous sender, "You didn't deserve this, make it count." I stared at the screen, hands still, no tears, no rage, just clarity. They thought I was broken, but I was awake. I copied the file, backed it up twice, then again. It was time to choose, burn it all down, or build something they couldn't destroy. I didn't say a word after saving that video. I didn't need to. Instead, I went dark. No posts, no replies. I skipped 2 scheduled appearances and stopped taking calls, even from the reporters who'd once sided with me. Let them speculate. In the silence, Celine bloomed. She smiled wider on camera, dropped phrases like vindication in interviews, and hinted she was working on something even bigger for the Vitagenics future. The public lapped it up. For a moment, she had the narrative back. Let her think she'd won. Behind the curtain, I was meeting with a whistleblower attorney named Kevin Kleinman, quiet, sharp, and allergic to drama. He'd handled pharmaceutical fraud cases for decades. I showed him everything: emails, audio recordings, the anonymous video. Then I introduced him to Miss Ramirez, a retired regulatory advisor I knew from a compliance seminar years ago. She remembered Celine, too. Barely disguised contempt flickered across her face when the name came up. Kevin tapped his pen twice, looked me in the eye, and said, "We're not just talking about stolen ideas here. This smells like securities fraud." I nodded. "I don't want fireworks. I want records." By Friday, the lawsuit was filed. It wasn't just about wrongful termination anymore. It was a multi-claim filing: retaliation, defamation, intellectual property theft, willful misrepresentation to investors. It had teeth, and it had backup. 3 sealed affidavits from ex-employees, names redacted for now, describing a pattern of coercion, verbal abuse, and corner-cutting that went back 4 years. The story spread like gasoline on dry leaves. By Monday morning, the news had landed. Bloomberg covered the legal filing. TechCrunch ran with the headline, "Female Founder Faces IP Suit Amid Allegations of Internal Sabotage." And NPR? They used my name, not as a cautionary tale, but as a whistleblower. That same afternoon, 2 board members of the Vitagenics Group resigned. No explanation, just quiet exits posted to LinkedIn. The firm's valuation plummeted. Stockholders demanded an emergency town hall. Arden? She wasn't answering calls anymore. One source said she cleared her desk in 15 minutes and left without a word. Celine posted another video, this time stiff, awkward. "We take these allegations seriously. The truth will come out. We remain committed to innovation and integrity." But her voice shook, and I wasn't finished. 2 days later, a biotech ethics watchdog, PharmAlert, released a 30-page exposé. They'd been compiling data on suspicious inconsistencies in trial records across mid-sized biotech firms. One name came up repeatedly: Celine Cantor. They cross-checked trial dates with grant reports, statistical inconsistencies, and internal flags that had been buried, including one memo I'd sent 12 months ago, raising concerns about Phase 3 results that didn't align with preclinical data. She'd ignored it. Then she'd erased it. The watchdog's report concluded, "Intentional data falsification with the potential to mislead investors and regulators. Investigation warranted." I woke up to find my name trending again, but this time with phrases like vindicated, early whistleblower, and corporate scapegoat. As I scrolled, I landed on one quote that stuck with me. Turns out, she wasn't too expensive. She was just too honest. I exhaled slowly. Let it settle in. Celine had spent months trying to reduce me to a footnote, and now, all eyes were on her. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one card left to play, and I held it close. The courtroom was cool and sterile that morning, but tension pulsed under the surface. Celine sat across the aisle, her legal team whispering behind a screen of branded folders. She looked composed, painted-on confidence, flawless hair, every inch the image she clung to so desperately. I didn't look at her. Instead, I placed a manila folder in front of my attorney, nodded once, and watched the judge motion for opening statements. The room quieted. My attorney stood. "Your Honor, in addition to the existing claims, we would like to present a supplementary clause embedded in the original co-founding agreement, dated 7 years ago." Celine shifted in her seat. This clause, Section 6B.12, was activated upon confirmation of corporate ethics violations. It states that in such an event, any shares transferred under duress or misrepresentation shall revert to the originating co-founder. A hush fell over the courtroom, and then the evidence rolled in. The SEC's acknowledgement of falsified Phase 3 data, the whistleblower affidavits, internal emails showing Celine burying concerns I had flagged, the video of her mocking me in a boardroom, unaware she was being recorded. Each document fed the clause like kindling to flame. Celine's face twisted, just barely, as the judge leaned forward. Clause 6B.12 is valid. Enforcement is granted. That was it. In a matter of seconds, her voting rights were stripped. Her seat on the board was vacated. Control of my shares, my voice, returned to me. And Celine? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, shoulders rigid, jaw tight, and didn't blink as the truth unspooled like a noose. Arden didn't show up for the second half of trial. Word had it she was quietly removed, handed a resignation agreement to avoid indictment. She took it, of course. People like her always do. The footage from board meetings, her laughter, her backhanded digs, circulated like wildfire. There's a particular cruelty in watching someone smile at you with full intent to erase you. But the court had spoken. Still, I didn't stay. I stepped outside that courtroom and didn't look back. Closure, for me, was never going to come in the form of applause or a gavel drop. I didn't want my company back. I wanted my peace. A month passed. I declined interviews, offers, even a podcast deal from someone who once called me volatile. Instead, I rented a modest office space near the lake. I kept the lights low, the team small, and built something else. A fund specifically for women like me. Founders with scrapes on their knees and dignity in their back pockets. No flash, just grit. And this time, I didn't need anyone to validate it. On a quiet Wednesday morning, I agreed to one interview. Local station, short segment. I wore a simple dark blazer, no designer logo, no power statement. But on my wrist, the bracelet. The one my mother gave me the week I left for college. The one Celine called a trinket that didn't match the brand. I'd tucked it away for years, embarrassed by how much it meant to me. Now I wore it in plain view. And when the reporter asked if I had anything to say to the people who doubted you, I just smiled, shifted slightly, and let the camera catch the glint of that bracelet as I said, "Not everything small is weak. Some things just take time." I left the station without waiting for playback. Some things aren't meant to be watched. They're meant to be lived. Celine never apologized, and maybe she never will. But I didn't fight for her apology. I fought for the girl I used to be, the one they called too much. And today, she stands